find something new.
A little while back, Andrew, Dan, and I got together to reflect on our work almost 3 years ago with Gayatri and Diana, where we turned a keynote to 800 people into a conversation among everyone there. Andrew is a tech principal at Thoughtworks, as well as author and online trainer for O'Reilly. Andrew specializes in Java, JVM technologies, agile delivery, build tools and automation, and domain-driven design. As usual, our reflection conversation centered on these core questions. When and how did we meet? And what have we worked on together? What were the whats that found their way in our work together? And what difference has that made for each of us? We hope you find listening to this reflection conversation helpful in furthering your practice in working with groups. Thanks. Right around,
Yeah, I wrote a book.
Yeah.
I wrote a book.
Yeah.
I wrote a book.
Yeah. Yes, you did. You did.
Yeah.
And just, that whole journey from idea to blog to keynote to all the work you're doing around it to the book and what's happening now and all those kinds of things.
So I think because I can't remember, I don't know if I've said this. All of the stuff we collected in the keynote went into the pitch to O'Reilly for the book. And so basically the things, I don't know, maybe the idea was good, but also the traffic report from Martin Fowler's blog, plus like all the raw data and all the stuff that we got from DDD Europe, I think must have helped, which was good. So, that was good. So
So kind of that rapid mass feedback, right? Kind of an inflection point in some ways.
Yeah, totally. And that gave me because I don't know, the book changed the road. I remember you said to me, Mike, and I had this on my a post-it note in front of me for ages. How would you use the advice process to write the book about the advice process? So I totally took that to heart. And so the first pass of it was the keynote. And I was like, it does, right? And it totally does sound like a Rosinski thing. And so and then O'Reilly were like, you're going to write the book. And every time, when I got to chapter 4, they were like, we're going to release it on the platform. And and if you want feedback, you can put your email address on the thing and then people can email you. So I was getting, and I think, I can't remember, I'm probably making this up, but I was like, please give me, this whole thing is about decentralized decision making and not being the smartest person in the room. So, but I'm aware of the fact that I am now writing a book, which kind of puts me in this position where I know what to do and I tell you what to do. So instead, please give me feedback. And lots of the later stuff, some of the chapters disappeared because I thought they were important. Didn't turn out to be. Other ones completely came out of nowhere because I was like, oh, this is a thing. Right. So, and it was things I hadn't worried about, which was interesting. Things I'd been doing but hadn't realized I was doing. All that kind of stuff. I had this big fear that not fear, that's a bit of a strong word, but I had this concern that it worked because of this some aspect of my personality that I would skip around in front of people and then that would magically make it appear. And that I wouldn't you can't write that in a book. So but it turned out it wasn't other people were they were trying it and we're doing this and this is working and this isn't working. So it was super cool, super interesting. So but so that kind of got rolled in. And now it's kind of cool. So now that it's published, people ping me on LinkedIn and all this kind of stuff and give me feedback. And what was interesting actually was because I was writing for O'Reilly, I was like, I'm going to try and write a book which tells you not to do what I tell you to do. It's more here's the feeling, right? Like when we tried to collect, when we built all of the stuff, right? It's we want to kind of create a space where people can have a thing. And so most of my book is this is how you create a space. And then your job is to not fill the space with things. Your job is to keep the space. And O'Reilly were like, that's cool, but people buy our books to be told this isn't true. You don't buy an O'Reilly book to be told what to do, but they don't want you to say, I don't know what to do. Here's, you've paid this much money for my book, but then I'm going to avoid the question. So I spent ages with Rita, my editor, trying to find language which would be you might come across this problem. This might be how you would think about it. This might be something that you could try. Please make it your own kind of thing as opposed to just blindly following me. Yeah. But that was super interesting. And that reminded me a lot of what we were doing. So we spent a lot of time trying to find stuff, right? Which was cool. I like the finding bit. So, and it turns out you think you know what you're going to write in a book, and then you write the book, and it turns out that you didn't really understand it. and you come out with a very different thing at the end. You come out as a very different human being at the end of writing a book, actually, as well. So Diana and I were thinking about that, but yeah, it was good,
Yeah,
good
there's
fun.
definitely some
So
threads there.
yeah, so technically it's both your fault, it's Diana's fault as well,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
so.
it's all your fault.
Yeah, exactly. Look what you
Yeah,
made me do.
yeah, right. Well, we all did
So
it, I guess, in some ways, right? It all sort of
yeah,
brings me
mm,
back, right?
yeah,
And yeah, Dan, it looked like earlier you had. I just wanted to check
I
in
just
on it.
want
Yeah.
I'm interested in the life after book
Hmm.
experiences, and what do you think's
yeah.
changed for you, like personally?
That's a good. I think
Hmm.
it's like it's very interesting. Like so, scary things. People upsides. I can now. It's very weird saying I wrote a book. It's very cool, but it's very weird saying I wrote a book. But people kind of give you this. They give you this extra weight that I'm not always comfortable with. They're like, "Oh, you must know all the answers to these questions." I'm like, "I don't. I'm
Mm.
getting better at like figuring out how we might better phrase the question and kind of stuff,
Hmm.
Hmm.
which is really cool.
Hmm.
But you do have to kind of push back against this, like, "Oh, you must know the answer to all these questions"
Hmm.
type
Hmm.
thing,
Hmm.
which is again it's kind of something that we spent a lot of time talking about, right? Like, because the whole point of the keynote was we were asking questions, right? And it wasn't like
Hmm.
telling people the answer or even leading them anywhere specifically. It was more like, what do people think?
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of cool. But the cool thing is people just like people who I thought were famous are like coming to me going, "Oh, I'm so excited to meet you," and I was like, "That's weird. I didn't think that was." I was like, I'm excited to meet you. Why are you excited to meet me? And they're like, "Oh yeah, I've read your book." And I was like, "Wow, all of it? Maybe not all of it." So but yeah, it's kind of cool. It's good. So but yeah,
Hmm.
but
It's like
apart from that,
well, you've now
yeah, yeah,
experienced another dimension of this.
yeah,
What you're describing, I feel, is like a something that many of us, I will say, or people who, in the circles that we've moved in around various communities in tech, I suppose, in
yep,
general,
yep,
is
yep,
like there's a sort of sense of being trapped in maybe an identity of being the expert, whether you're a consultant or a
Hmm.
speaker or an author,
yep,
like you feel maybe that you're not allowed to not have you, you got where you are by knowing the answers, and people come to you because they want the answers,
yep,
because everyone's wrapped up in a, let's be honest, mostly Western global northern culture where it's like
Right.
problem
Right.
solution, got a
yeah,
problem,
yeah,
find
yeah,
the solution, and there's no other way of thinking about things. So
Right.
yeah,
to say I don't know
yeah,
Right.
is
Right.
quite tricky. I
Well,
think.
and to be curious about our expertise and how it applies at the moment,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
As opposed to, well, actually, it's probably some expertise I already have that, yeah, I should just apply that, right? Even just
Yep,
the ability to say, should I apply existing, right?
yep,
Or do
yeah,
I need
yeah,
to just
yeah,
develop an
yeah, yeah,
extension of my
yeah, yeah, yeah,
expertise in the future based on that question? Sort of like your
yeah,
question
totally,
of
totally.
questioning. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally, totally. Yeah, like exactly. Like the whole like what I realized as I did it more and more. So I realized it was like when I wrote the blog post, and then I realized it when we did the keynote and all this stuff. It was interesting to me that the best bit of it was like being suddenly given access to lots of more smart people, and then I realized that the whole point of it was like if you think you're the smartest person, you've probably already failed, right? Because you can't even before AI came on the scene, right? Which was terrifying because that kind of appeared while I was writing the book. Um, the whole it's a strong word, but like the cult of expertise was a bit of a, I think it had, especially in technology, right, where we like to be
Mhm.
right, and you can be right because you tell a computer what to do, and then the computer does what you asked it to do. It would kind of naturally draw people to it, including
Mhm.
me, the way you
Mhm.
could like, it's a bit more easy to control and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then I was like, right, but I kind of want to undermine that, and I want to be like, how can we like get out of the way? How, and this is what a funny story actually. So there's a me writing the book, I didn't know how to write a book. So Rita, my editor, who I like mention as often as possible, was amazing. Rita taught me how to write and how to structure a book and how to do all these things.
Mhm.
But Rita's also written into the book as a junior developer because Rita isn't an architect, right? Rita is an expert editor.
Mhm.
But Rita would ask me amazing questions. And so Rita is an example in the book. She's the name I've given to someone.
Mhm.
Um, because that person will be like, yeah, but why? Like, why? Why do we like, and you need that kind of thing. And that's what
Mhm.
the whole conversations thing, and just like removing the being right and being wrong, and like creating this space where you're like, right, like maybe you are wrong, but asking the question can be
Mhm.
more powerful than knowing the answer to things, because it might
Mhm.
rephrase the thing you're doing in the first place.
Mhm.
Mm.
And that was super cool. And then AI comes along, and now nobody's the smartest person in the room, right? Or we don't think like we're the smart. We're all terrified of what this thing is capable of. So that was interesting. But it was interesting to me as well because it put the thinking more at the center, and the collaboration, and the creativity,
Mhm.
which was cool. Because I think this is kind of what I'm thinking about now if I write another book. It's like inhabiting the space where we write code, because when you write code, you live in that world for a long time.
Mhm.
So I'm now very interested in like, okay, if we figure out there's this kind of way of negotiating decisions in software, are there other kind of social things if we take these social if we bring more of the human being into the software, or not that we don't bring them in, they're already there. If we acknowledge more of the fact that there's human beings who write this software
Mhm.
and that live in these code bases like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
what does that do? And that was super interesting. So and I've started doing a few talks about this kind of thing, and people are like, wow, some people don't like it at all because they're like, it's just thinking. You need to think and then you type and then the computer does what you tell you.
Mhm.
But other people are like, oh, wow, that does definitely have an impact. And all of these softer things are definitely making our lives harder,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
interesting to me. So,
Harder. How?
like, because we think software, like at a very reductive level, we think we tell a computer what to do and it does it. But that's not what works, right? That's like, it's always harder than that, even at the
Mhm.
very, very reductive level. But then there's like human beings and the world and all of this
Mhm.
other stuff that gets
Mhm.
in the way. Um, and what I'm interested in is like, maybe they're not getting in the way. Maybe they get in the way because we pretend they're not there and we'd rather that they weren't there.
Mhm.
But if we're like, right, they are there, how do we
Right.
get the best out of them? How do we like make it more? So I've got this idea of like someone talked about habitable code bases and stuff, and I'm like, that's interesting as a habitability
Mhm.
is a very interesting thing that I don't I haven't thought much about. The problem
Yeah.
is you write a book, you spend 10 years thinking about the book, and then eventually the frustration bubbles over and you write a book.
Yeah.
And I'm now wondering, do you need to spend another 10 years getting frustrated about a new load of stuff that then bubbles over into a book? And people
Mhm.
don't seem to wait 10 years. I'm like, oh, how do I
Mhm.
catch up on all of this stuff? So,
What stood out the most to you when you think about the way that the advice process is operationalized in the way that
mm,
you're talking about it in the book, and either that's things that you've observed or been part of during the process of writing it or since publication?
that's a good question.
What's really standing out as like that? Oh, it never even occurred to me, or look at that. This is a trend. So, that I suppose the only other because it was Lalou, right? That really
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
thought
yeah, yeah.
this
Yeah, totally.
has come from
Yeah.
him. So and obviously that book comes with and the movement that's come out of it has kind of
Yeah.
various examples of how self-organizing
Hmm.
entities and
Mhm.
organizations can implement it. But like, I'm wondering what you've seen and like bringing it right up to date with you from your own looking through your lens. Like
Yeah.
what's what's working, and what's not working with
I think
the
so.
advice process.
That's a good question. So number one, and this did actually make it into the book, so it wasn't after the book, but while I was doing more, working with it more and more and hearing from people about using it and
Mhm.
things, I'd always get this pushback, and I knew I would get this pushback, and I was very keen to, like, that's why I loved hearing about people from other places who'd never met me before. So what was very cool was it turns out that people are smarter than you give them credit for, and it turns out that people are more inclined to trust each other if you just make space. Lots of
Mhm.
our how we organize is set up because people are like, well, I don't trust them. And then you just like, well, just let go. And this is in like the chapters about how to adopt the advice process and all of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It's like how to try a little bit, just let go a little bit from the handlebars and think, oh, okay, right. And then you let go now, all that kind of stuff. So the fact that people are worthy of trust, but they need to step, and hence this goes back to space. So the idea of the space, by the way, is Rita's again. Rita's like, I think you're talking about making space for something, and then you have to let go and let people walk into the space and let them fail and all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And the more you cultivate the trust, the more it works. So that's super interesting.
Mm.
The other thing I think is interesting, because so like as you point out, I have not created the architecture advice process. I stuck the word architecture on front of the advice process, which is a
Hmm.
thing that I think it comes from Birdsong or somewhere, and then was written up by Fred
Hmm.
Lelou, and there's various flavors of it. But I think it's interesting because of the fact we work in a world which the thing we produce is software. So it's not a physical thing, but it is a thing which can act in the world.
Hmm.
So it's very based on thoughts, like thought stuff, right? So we think about it in our heads, and then we tell a computer what to do. And it's very fungible, like fungible is probably the wrong word, but very malleable.
Mm.
But it's powerful, right? I can write very little code and I can push it to some cloud provider, and then magically I can literally change the political system in America. You know what I mean? I can do big things, right? Um, that's interesting because the trajectory of software architecture up to that point was like we'll control more and more stuff outside of the code, but it would
Mm.
never really fully work because you'd look at the code and the architecture of what was in the code was completely different from what was like on a whiteboard or on a wiki or something.
Hmm.
So there already was this power in the hands of people who wrote the code or had the power to ship the code to production that nobody was saying out loud. And now I'm like, right, let's acknowledge that that's powerful, but let's acknowledge that you don't just want people who are at the code face typing. You want people like Diana. You want people who are looking at the overall system and looking at the knowledge system and the
Hmm.
social aspects and all of
Hmm.
this kind of stuff. And when you acknowledge that both are there and both are equally powerful, which might not be in other worlds, right? Like maybe in, I don't know, like famously one of the companies that use the advice process make nuclear power plants. Someone's going to
Hmm.
have money and someone else isn't going to have money. But if everyone can write code, there's a lot more kind of spread out type stuff. The power is more equally distributed. If you acknowledge those two things, then you can combine them really quickly. And because of software and how the cloud and DevOps and all of the things in software work these days, not only can very many people in a democratized way
Mm.
or a anarchistic way, strictly speaking, so not the chaos anarchy, but like the kind of the self-organizing type of
Hmm.
anarchy. Um, if you acknowledge that, and the fact that all of these trends in software, like the cloud and continuous deployment stuff, I can have an idea, I can write it in code, and I can deploy it
Hmm.
in half a day. There's nothing you can't build a nuclear power plant in half a day.
Hmm.
So that's super interesting. That's where I think it stands a chance of it sticks. This is the last thing to kind of the last thing that's surprising to me is the target of the book was architects who were stressed because they couldn't be in enough places at enough times to impact the architecture, and lead developers who knew they were basically doing architecture work but didn't because they didn't have the word architect in the title. What's interesting is the amount of like enterprise architects, CTOs, even higher up executives who are like, this is either how I've been doing things anyway, and you've put names on it, which was interesting. So I've kind of
Hmm.
tapped into something that was already
Create a
happening,
common language in some way.
which is cool. Yeah, I've just
Yeah.
put names on things.
Hmm.
Um, or they're like, wow, you've just described a lower order version of the problem I see at a higher level,
Hmm.
and now I've tried this and it's worked. I did
Hmm.
not expect that. I didn't. I was kind of trying to go under the radar so that it wouldn't.
Hmm.
Lots of the book you could read is like it's trying to like last chapter is like how to create bubbles, and the bubbles are basically it's like from the outside you just look like a highly efficient set of software teams, but from the inside you're like it's political anarchy, right? You're like self-organizing and self-managing and
Hmm.
self-sustaining. But it's interesting, like people are like, wow, that works, and we can use this mindset to approach other things. So
Hmm.
we step back, we set the context, we set the budgets, and we then kind of leave people to do their own thing.
Hmm.
That's very interesting. So,
Hmm.
and I was very interested. Like, I kind of always got the impression that executive, higher hierarchical level people were quite stressed. But yeah, it feels like it's because the world's moving so fast, they can't
Hmm.
keep up anyway, right? So
Hmm.
it's super interesting.
Right. So
So
this
now
might
I'm
be
having loads of conversation with those people, which is a
yeah.
bit strange. So,
Oh.
so yeah,
So it kind of it shifted even sort of who you've been talking
yeah,
to, and almost in some ways, what I'm hearing, like the going the whole way back to the beginning of the conversation, like the inflection point of all that information being able to be part of the book proposal and kind of get that going.
yep.
But in some ways, with the rate of change, with what they're realizing, if they can't keep up individually at their level in the hierarchy, that maybe this is a method for the rate of change to be enabled across the
Yeah,
organization, like to
yeah,
unleash people to follow a path within a kind of a
yeah.
container, a
And
context,
actually,
as you said.
and 100%. And actually, this is the that makes me think of something. I did a talk, a keynote, closing keynote, a year and a half ago at OOP in Munich. So the object, or like, I can't remember. Anyway,
Without
Software
us?
Architecture Summit.
Never
Sorry,
mind.
sorry, Mike is in it. It's but I did the talk, and then afterwards, someone came up to me and went, "I'm a QA, so I don't do software architecture, but I think if I took everything you talked about and just removed the word architecture and just made it decisions,
Mm,
would this work?" And I was like, "Yes, you've unlocked the secret code. Like I've just picked it and said, do these
mm,
things, but the whole thing works." It's
mm,
very interesting. I mean, again, that's because I've just taken it from Lalu and Bertzog and all that kind of stuff,
mm,
and just in a very because it's like I say, because it's concrete, you can do things and then you can put it in the world and you get feedback. It's quite easy to prove whether or not it's
mm,
working.
mm.
But I definitely think, yeah, it's very interesting to see the. I'm
Since
trying not,
since we
yeah,
worked together
okay.
with you on the DDD keynote,
Mhm.
the one that brought us together before the book,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what have you noticed changing yourself around the way that you work with groups?
Oh,
Mhm.
And I'm
that's a good
wondering
question.
because because it's although it wasn't officially the advice process that we
Yeah,
used in that keynote event.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was highly participatory. The participation power was distributed across the
Hmm.
room, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I know that at the time you reacted to that quite strongly, and I think for all of us, it was
yeah.
quite surprising in many ways.
It was
Have you
exciting.
found that sort of leaking into the way you
100%.
work with
It's
groups? Yeah.
100%. There's upsides and downsides. The upsides are like I spend far more of my time now sensing what's going on,
Mm.
figuring out what the space is, figuring out what the questions are, figuring out what the most important question is, which is why I now spend ages with Diana Montalian as well. Because Diana's just can't turn that kind of thinking off.
Mhm.
Um, and then figuring out how to make a space and the right questions and very few of the right questions, right? And then just kind of like poking and interjecting and all this kind of stuff and leading groups to come to their own conclusions.
Mm.
That's incredibly powerful. So, and like I've noticed it now, it's one of the reasons why things, practices like Alberto Brandolini's event storming, and again, there's lots of like, let's bring everyone together, let's keep it. Things I've learned from Alberto, and we also did it, like kind of keep it low fi, right? It doesn't need to be over curated. I mean, like I
Mhm.
know there was tons of work, right? But we kind of were like, we're going to make the space and do some
Mhm.
nice, careful stuff about the space, but then let's let the magic happen.
Mhm.
Interesting. The downside is sometimes clients expect you to produce like physical things. And so I'm like, the physical thing I produce is a bunch of teams which are far more collaborative, far more trusting, far more productive, far more
Mhm.
bought into what they're building,
Mhm.
far more um, when it really works, when you really see, like when the trust builds, it's good because then you can see things happening in lots of places. When it really builds, you can see people disagreeing and feeling safe. You can see a
Mhm.
far greater level of involvement. You can see um, like just like proper like magical collaboration. I mean, like famously, the word magical isn't in the Martin Fowler blog post, but one of the things I wanted because then I saw it happening more and more, and we saw it in the keynote, right? I wanted to put into the book, and there's a theme. This was again, me and Rita were like co-conspirators in this. There is a theme of like magical ritual, like kind of I wanted to not use like hierarchical, militaristic, like very masculine kind of metaphors. I wanted to
Mhm.
use like more emergent,
Mhm.
systemic,
Mhm.
Hmm.
um, kind of esoteric metaphors, right? Just to kind
Mhm.
of point out that this stuff is there is if you think about it and put boxes and straight lines around about it, you've missed out on so much stuff. So
Mhm.
that was kind of cool. Downside, people are like, I thought you would produce a thing. I was like, what
Mhm.
the thing is the human beings that are creating this stuff, right? So that sometimes I'm now learning I need to like maybe at the start say you won't necessarily see a lot of documentation coming out of me, but you ought to see teams that are more engaged in building software they care about and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's good.
It also sounds like maybe there's an opportunity of exploration around, well, what is that documentation or that, that thing that helps them notice too or see what you see in a
Yeah.
different way. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, this is the thing. I think that this is what the book that Diana's writing. One of the other things I've realized is maybe because of my autism, I see patterns and like now I realize it's more like systems. I've always done it and I don't think I could turn it off.
Mm.
Not everybody sees it. Lots of people do experience the world in a very linear way.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's when you see the systemic things, then it works fantastically well. And if you don't, it still works very well because procedurally, I can now get my work done more effectively.
Hmm.
But the real, when you see all of the bits kind of cross-fertilizing and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff, that's when the real, like, exciting stuff starts happening. Yeah, that's what I'm really looking forward to. And this was cool, actually. So the first client I tried bits of it, but then the first client I tried were called OpenGI, so I can name them because they're happy to be talked about. Um, I got to host a track about the future of this. Another thing happened actually. I got asked to host a track at QCon London called "The Future of Architecture Practice in 2025,"
Hmm.
and the last talk in the track was Pete Hunter and Elena. I shouldn't have said Pete's surname. Elena, whose surname I can't pronounce, from North Macedonia.
Hmm.
They did a talk which is basically, we've been doing this thing Andrew's been telling you to do for 4 years. Here's what happened. All
Hmm.
of the good stuff, all of the bad stuff. They
Hmm.
had like they got must have got permission to like have full screenshots of all of their ADRs, their architectural
Hmm.
decision records, with all of the different people having different opinions, and it was it was a trip down memory lane. But it was like, crikey, didn't just happen. We had to like work, and Peter and I had to support it and
Hmm.
collaborate on it and all this kind of stuff. Um, that was super cool. So what I want to see now is like people who really get it, like the folks at OpenGI. They've taken it to places I didn't even think it would go, right? So,
Hmm.
and they found where it doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work. Like different bits of their systems don't need it, so you don't need to do it, right? So,
Yeah. You know, it's been really awesome to kind of hear, right, the early stories, what it meant, right, and then sort of where it's taking you and what you're noticing now, right? Like, oh, that's an opportunity for exploration, or this thing is happening, and
yeah,
how does it tweak, or the idea of now it's sort of like blank advice process, right?
yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah,
fill in that blank when
yeah.
and this is kind of an invitation to all of us, like, what difference has working together made on each of us, right?
Mhm.
As we look back now, I mean, it was like 3 years ago. We were in the
That
thick
was a long time.
of,
Yeah,
probably the shape of the design had probably just been solidified at this point. We're late April, right? May. We're getting together in June, but like,
yep.
what difference have we made on each other?
Well, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is the way the whole design process with you, Diana, Gayatri, and ah, uh, what else am I missing?
No, it was Diana,
You got
Catherine,
it.
me,
You
you
nailed it.
two.
I was there. I
Ah,
was
Yeah,
there.
so you
Mike. Don't
three.
forget
Fuck
Mike.
yeah,
I
right?
think there
Remember
was
me?
fourth.
No, it
No,
wasn't.
sorry,
No,
us and you.
no.
Yeah, you three. So there was only three of you on the stage. Oh my God.
Yeah, that
Anyway,
was it. That was
let's
it.
start again. So the whole process of designing with you, and bringing you together on a regular cadence to talk about this thing that was taking shape, and every week maybe some people would be there, or all of us would be there,
Yep.
and like that eventually arriving together in Amsterdam and delivering something. Mike and I hadn't like we weren't even a proper business partnership then, but
Mm,
we were just two independent consultants who happened to collaborate on a thing, and then we were pulled in by to this project, and
Yep.
that became the blueprint for so much other stuff that we did. I suppose that's the
mm,
biggest difference, was that
mm,
we had that experience of like, this is how we're going to write stuff down. This is how we're going to hold a space and a drumbeat of cadence, and
mm,
with a group of people, whether we're coaching them, we're co-delivering with them and designing something.
mhm,
So in our work, that was the biggest difference. That was,
mhm,
yeah, it was just like seminal stuff, really,
mhm.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Do you want to go, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, well, and for me, building on that, like Dan, I think said that super well, and that is like something that's made a difference in me too. And also, what I think about it is something you started this conversation with, right? The idea of we're bringing expertise, and so are you, and
Yeah.
each of you are bringing your own humanity and approach to engaging on topics, right?
Yeah.
So how to best hold space across those meetings, the cadence, we're together, we're not together, asynchronously, synchronously, but allow each of our contributions, personalities, instincts, notions to get in, to arrive at what's best for the five of us
Yeah.
that we think is the most worthwhile experiment to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In honor of ourselves, but also the participants, right? And the cause of what we're trying to learn. So again, some of that nascent early, right, experiences about, how to be malleable in that way, right? Step back from our expertise or hear a notion and figure out how it fits across all of us.
Yeah.
And
that's,
kind of continue to do that work.
Yeah, so that was like, as a consultant, I collaborate all the time, but like seeing, the breadth of the collaboration was the thing for me. That's and I think, like, I already knew that I wanted to talk about, like, so that was the idea, and I pitched it to DDD Europe. But like seeing the strength of all of that kind of the stuff, and like not being sure, and making sure we find the right thing that we were going to talk about. Because we spent a lot of time exploring and searching, right? And I know, I think you're going to speak to Diana as well, but like what was interesting, Diana and Kat also did a talk at this QCon as well, and they spent most of their time on a whiteboard telling each other stories to find out, because the idea was Diana's a systems architect and Kat Morris is a product manager. I thought they would have a fight, because I'm like, systems architects never get on with product managers, so can you please have a fight, because you're both eloquent people. They didn't, which was even better, but they spent, so this is a better example than all of my small ones, but like they just spent so long getting to know each other, and the talk was magical. Like, because they found that, and that's what there was this kind of chemistry or something, which then spread to the entire 850, however many people in the audience. That was cool. So now I haven't obviously had that experience to be able to do that again, but like you get to notice those little things when you're like, oh, this is happening. This is a thing. Ooh, you can feel it. Kind of going.
The connection that comes from preparing together and
totally.
And each of us being able to show up as us, right, and contribute as us.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks, Andrew.
See you soon.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.